The Thunder Soul wasn't humanity's first battleship. It was the last one anyone ever dared to provoke. She wasn't sleek or beautiful like alien ships carved from crystal or folded space. No, the Thunder Soul was ugly, thick-plated, black-skinned, with her hull covered in scars, burn marks, and pitted craters from wars no one talked about anymore. She moved like a beast, not a machine. There were no diplomats on board, no compromise panels or peacekeepers, just soldiers, just one mission. And at the center of it all stood Commander Renner Holt, a man who had watched entire planets fall, alliances burn, and friends die under alien fire. His voice was iron and gravel, and his eyes were the kind you didn't meet unless you wanted to carry a grudge for life. He had fought on Europa's acid fields, bled during the Sirius Revolt, and buried his only son after the Iraq Tel incident. Now he was about to show the galaxy what happened when humanity stopped forgiving. The Thunder Soul drifted silently through the Kurath expanse, a dead zone once rich with colonies until the Zilvarians made their move. It started with one broadcast, static first, then screams. A mining colony in orbit around Pyravi had gone dark. No distress calls, no survivors. Only the eerie silence of another world wiped clean. Then came the second hit, and the third. Humanity begged for answers. The Galactic Council shrugged. The Zilvarians denied it all. And Holt? He didn't wait for consensus. He activated Protocol 77, Retribution without mercy. "You're clear to fire when I say burn," Holt said, walking the command bridge like a ghost with unfinished business. His XO, Marin Vex, glanced up from the targeting systems. "Coordinates locked, 42 civilian orbitals, dozens of command stations. We sure about this?" "They made it clear," Holt growled. "They thought we were weak, thought we'd beg. Now they get to learn what begging looks like, from the other side of the barrel." The crew didn't cheer. This wasn't a war of glory or vengeance. This was a statement. One written in plasma and blood, meant to echo through star systems like a god scream. "Bring up the graviton lance," Holt ordered. It was humanity's dirtiest weapon. Illegal by council standards. It didn't just destroy a station, it unraveled it atom by atom, while the victims felt everything. Vex hesitated. "Once we fire, there's no turning back. We won't be able to hide this. The council will brand us outlaws." "We're not hiding anymore," Holt said, steel in his voice. "We've played nice for 100 years. We built peace, shared our tech, gave them our culture, our trade, our damn blood, and every time they took it and spat in our face, they call us savages, apes. They think we're just lucky brutes who stumbled into space." He paused. "They forgot what we really are." Then the order came. Burn. The Thunder Soul lit up. Flares of red energy sliced through space like blades. The graviton lance cracked open the Zelvarian command dome at Veil 3, pulling its core into a singularity that exploded in a silent shockwave of pure light. 3 orbitals went dark in under a minute. Dozens of ships scrambled to respond. None made it. The Thunder Soul tore through them like a wolf through sheep, leaving nothing behind but wreckage and ash. On the bridge, Holt watched it all, not with satisfaction, but grim finality. "They'll come," Vex whispered. "The whole damn galaxy." "Let them," Holt muttered. "This was just the first strike." The silence after the first strike was worse than any battle. It was like the whole galaxy inhaled at once and forgot how to breathe. In the hours after the destruction of Veil 3 and its surrounding orbitals, the Thunder Soul went dark. No transmissions, no broadcasts, not even a transponder ping. It drifted just outside Zelvarian border space, cloaked in a quantum ghost field, watching, waiting. Commander Renner Holt stood alone in the war chamber, his fists clenched behind his back as holograms flared to life before him. Zelvarian news feeds in chaos, council envoys stuttering in disbelief, and the Zelvarian High Warlord himself barking threats across the stars. Unprovoked aggression, they said. Terrorism, they called it. No one mentioned Pyra-V. No one mentioned the 3 colonies that went silent before Holt's attack. No one talked about the human children found incinerated in their shelters, or the broadcast footage scrubbed from council archives showing Zelvarian drones hunting unarmed settlers like animals. No. That didn't fit the narrative. They wanted to believe humans were the monsters now, that humanity had crossed the line. But Holt knew the truth. He'd known it for decades. You don't get peace by begging for it. You get peace by making sure no one ever forgets what happens when they fuck with you. The door slid open with a hiss. Vex stepped in, her uniform half unzipped. Dog tags clinking as she tossed a pad onto the table. You need to see this. They're mobilizing. Zelvarian fleets are heading towards the outer verge. Council's convened an emergency summit. They're calling us Rogue, Earth's rebellion fleet. Holt didn't even blink. Good. Vex narrowed her eyes. They're not coming with flags and diplomats. They're coming to erase us. They can try, Holt said, voice low. They'll learn something the hard way. We don't go quietly. He tapped the pad, pulling up a new feed, surveillance data from the fringe of Earth-controlled space. Patrols had already spotted scout ships, cloaked, slow-moving, testing the borders. They're probing, he muttered, trying to see how far they can push before we fold. Vex folded her arms. You think Earth will stand behind us? I don't care if they do. He turned, locking eyes with her. I didn't do this for Earth. I did it for the ones already dead. She didn't argue. There wasn't anything to say. Meanwhile, across the stars, in the high seat of the Galactic Council, panic was spreading like fire. Ambassador Solith of the Nurek Confederacy slammed his claws into the crystalline podium. This cannot stand. Humanity has deployed illegal weapons, annihilated Zelvarian civilians, and declared war outside this council's jurisdiction. A dozen voices rose in support, representatives of systems that had never known war on their own soil. They lived in glass towers, spoke in theory, and played diplomacy like a board game. Then one voice cut through them all. Ambassador Reed, the only human representative present, stood slowly. He was old, older than he looked. His left eye was cybernetic, a relic from the Scour War. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply spoke. You called it unprovoked. It wasn't. Murmurs. You called it terrorism. It wasn't. More murmurs. What Commander Holt did was justice. Harsh, bloody, brutal justice. The kind this galaxy doesn't understand anymore. The Nurek snapped. You defend the slaughter of innocents? Reed's eye glowed faintly red. Where was this outrage when the Pyra-V colony went dark? When 3,000 settlers were burned alive in their bunkers? When we begged this council for help, and you ignored us? Silence. Reed stepped forward. You made a mistake. You thought we were like you. Fragile. Afraid of conflict, chained by your treaties and your bureaucracy. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You forgot. We're human. We were born in blood and steel. We learned peace through war, and when you push us too far... He let the words hang. We don't break. We burn. Back on the Thunder Soul, alarms flared. Contacts, 15 clicks out, multiple signatures, cloaked. Vex jumped into action, hands flying across the control board. Zelvarian advance scouts, they're here. Holt stepped onto the bridge, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Weapons hot? Fully armed. Gravlance charged. Flak grid online. Holt stared at the screen, watching the silhouettes emerge. There were 6 ships. Scouts, lightly armed but fast and silent. Standard recon. They think we're going to run, he said coldly. He turned to his crew. Let's show them we don't. The Thunder Soul surged to life. In seconds, her guns roared, hypercoils spinning, pulse cannons screaming as red fury poured through space. 2 scouts vanished in a flash of light, torn in half before they even got off a shot. The rest scrambled. They weren't fighters. They weren't ready. But Holt didn't care. He chased them anyway. For the next hour, the Thunder Soul danced through asteroid fields and shattered moons, hunting down the scouts one by one. No warnings, no mercy, no survivors. When the last ship exploded, Holt finally sat. Message to Earth, he said. The comms officer nodded, recording. This is Commander Renner Holt of the Thunder Soul. We have engaged and destroyed 6 Zelvarian recon vessels inside disputed space. I don't care what the Council says. I don't care what the treaties claim. They drew first blood. This is humanity's answer. He paused. If you send envoys to recall me, I will ignore them. If you send ships to stop me, I will fire on them. We are no longer asking for justice. We are delivering it. He ended the transmission. No one in the room spoke, because everyone knew Holt wasn't bluffing. Elsewhere, inside a hidden Zelvarian war nest, the High Warlord listened to the battle reports with growing rage. These humans, they refuse to submit, he hissed, his mandibles twitching with fury. They've always been unpredictable, one of his lieutenants said. They are insects, the warlord spat. Primitive, violent, arrogant. Their species spread like rot, loud, stubborn, unclean. We gave them space. We tolerated their presence. And now this. He pointed at the burning wreckage on the holomap. They want a war? Then let them drown in it. He activated a hidden console. Deploy the fleet. The next 3 days were a blur of chaos. Zelvarian destroyers began striking fringe systems. Civilian ships were targeted. Human outposts disappeared. Earth tried to call for ceasefire. But it was too late. The war had begun. And Holt? He became something else. He became a legend. They said the Thunder Soul never stopped moving, never slept. That Holt knew where the enemy would strike before they even launched. That his crew was made of ghosts, soldiers with no families, no homes, only war in their blood. He struck fast, hard, and without warning. Blackout stations, gravity mines, viral warheads that turned Zelvarian AI systems into sludge. Every attack was surgical, precise, devastating. But the enemy was learning. And when they finally sent a dreadnought to track the Thunder Soul, it wasn't a clean fight. It was slaughter. The Black Claw, flagship of the Zelvarian fleet, was 3 times the size of the Thunder Soul. It carried 20 rail batteries, 2,000 soldiers, and a command crew bred for war. When Holt saw it on the scanners, he didn't flinch. He grinned. They think big ships scare us. He turned to Vex. Prep the spike drive. We're going in. You're going to ram them? No, I'm going to park us inside their command shell. It was suicide. No human ship had ever pulled a point jump that close to mass gravity. The math was insane. The heat alone would melt the outer hull. But Holt didn't care. He flew straight into hell, and he brought the devil with him. The Thunder Soul tore through the Zelvarian dreadnought like a blade through flesh. They appeared mid-deck, firing point-blank as stunned soldiers screamed and scrambled to respond. Holt led the boarding team himself, rifle in hand, armor slick with blood and heat. He fought like he was already dead, like nothing could stop him, like he didn't care if he came back. One by one, his squad carved a path to the dreadnought's core. And when they reached the command bridge, Holt looked the Zelvarian captain in the eyes and shot him without a word. "Charge their warp core," he ordered. "Then get out!" "You're detonating their ship?" Vex asked, panting, bleeding from a gash on her cheek. "No," Holt growled. "I'm sending a message." The Black Claw exploded across 3 sectors, the blast visible from moons away, a shockwave that sent every Zelvarian fleet into panic. Because it wasn't just a ship that died. It was the illusion. The illusion that humans were manageable, predictable, weak. That illusion was gone. Now all they saw was fire. The destruction of the Black Claw didn't just ripple through the galaxy. It shattered the illusion of Zelvarian superiority. For over a century, their empire stood as an untouchable symbol of power, advanced tech, vast numbers, war-bred command. But the day Holt detonated their flagship from the inside, that myth burned with it. What replaced it was a new truth, one the galaxy had tried to forget. Humanity fights dirty, and we don't stop. The Thunder Soul didn't retreat. She never did. Instead, she rode the chaos she created, carving a path through the wounded edge of Zelvarian territory like a serrated knife. For every world the Zelvarians had torched, Holt answered with plasma and steel. Orbital shipyards were turned to dust. Supply routes vanished overnight. Colonies loyal to the enemy were wiped clean in precision strikes. Quiet, clinical, final. But it was taking a toll. Inside the ship, the crew was running on adrenaline and hate. Every corridor echoed with silence now. No music, no laughter, no banter between soldiers. Just the hum of systems and the heavy weight of purpose. These men and women weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting because stopping meant accepting what had been done to them. Holt hadn't slept in 43 hours. He sat alone in the lower observation deck, a mug of cold ration coffee between his hands, staring through the armored window at a dead star drifting in the void. Vex entered silently, tossing a data slate onto the table. You lost 7 today. Holt didn't look at it. I know. You're burning them out. I'm burning myself out, he corrected. She sat across from him. There were bruises under her eyes, a stitched gash on her temple. We're running low on power cells. Ammo's down to 34%. Fuel's not looking much better. The crew's holding, but if we take another hit like on that orbital run, then we die. Her jaw clenched. You sound like you want that. He stared at her, quiet for a long time. Then finally, softly, I don't want to die. I want them to remember why they feared us. He stood, grabbing the slate. Prep the next strike. She didn't stop him. She didn't try to argue anymore, because deep down, she agreed with him. The next target was bold, insane even by Holt standards. Holt Prime, a fortified industrial world deep inside Zelvarian territory. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a resource hub, one of the few capable of refueling Dreadnought-class cruisers and mass-producing plasma-laced armor. Every war effort depended on it, and Holt wanted to burn it to the ground. The plan was suicide. Slip past their outer defenses under cloak, dive into low orbit, and drop the Ashwake, a thermobaric anti-atmospheric weapon banned under 10 separate council treaties. Even the council didn't build them anymore, but humans had. Quietly, illegally, and Holt had one left. It was never meant to be used, just a card in a deck that was never supposed to be played. But that card was about to be flipped. They arrived just outside Shitarn's moon, hiding behind debris fields left from ancient wars. Holt stood on the bridge, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes locked on the massive planet ahead. It shimmered with life. Factory lines, rail depots, armored silos buried under terrain. Ashwake is loaded, Vex confirmed. If this goes wrong, it won't, Holt said. It'll go exactly as it's meant to. The drop took 37 seconds. The Thunder Soul pierced the atmosphere like a falling god, releasing the Ashwake from its underbelly before pulling a high-gravity reversal to escape the blast. Shitarn's skies turned white. The explosion didn't just burn, it collapsed. The atmosphere folded inward, oxygen igniting instantly, pressure detonating lungs, machinery, entire ecosystems in one monstrous breath of fire. In under 5 minutes, Zetarn went from a production titan to a blackened corpse. And then the message came through, not from Zelvarians, from Earth. Commander Holt, this is Earth Command. Stand down, now. It was the first direct order in weeks. The comms officer looked nervous. Sir, it's official. They're invoking Section 9. Chain of command override. Holt didn't move. Put it through. The screen flashed to life. General Marcus Alden appeared, half his face covered in regulation chrome, voice clipped and cold. You've crossed every line, he snapped. You've made humanity a target. You've destabilized the sector, and now you've committed war crimes on a level that could draw extermination orders from the Council. Holt didn't blink. War crimes? Yes, Alden barked. The Ashwake? Are you out of your mind? They burned our people alive, Holt said calmly. They hunted them, made trophies out of them. We asked for help, begged for peace. You did nothing. That doesn't justify genocide. No, Holt agreed, voice suddenly sharp. What justifies genocide is silence. Your silence. The Council's silence. The whole damn galaxy watching while our worlds burned. He leaned closer to the screen. You let this happen. You let it fester. And now you're angry I cut the infection out with fire. There was a pause. You're relieved of command, Renner. Effective immediately. Stand down or be hunted as an enemy of Earth. The line cut. Holt stood still for a long moment. Then he turned to his crew. Anyone wants to leave, now's your chance. No one moved. Vex just said, What's next? They called it the Fall of the Silver Chain. A Zelvarian fleet, 20 ships strong, launched a trap near the gas giant Kareth 7. They baited a human supply vessel, lured in 2 destroyers, and opened fire. Within minutes, they wiped them out. The message was clear. We're still stronger. So Holt answered. The Thunder Soul dropped in from high orbit, burning hard, its hull glowing white from the atmospheric dive. No warnings, no threats, just action. She pierced the heart of the fleet with surgical brutality. First the med ships, then the fuel tankers, then the command vessels. But it wasn't the kills that terrified the galaxy. It was what they found afterward. Every surviving Zelvarian ship had been boarded, every officer executed. The dead were left floating in space, their bodies orbiting their own ships like grim satellites. A calling card, a warning. No one would admit it, but the fear was spreading. The Council began recalling its envoys. Trade with the Zelvarians slowed. Neutral systems started aligning with Earth again, not out of loyalty, but out of fear, because no one wanted to be next. And Holt? He kept moving, always forward. Always deeper into enemy space. But it couldn't last forever. Eventually they found him. The Thunder Soul was ambushed near the scarred remains of the Varn Belt. Multiple warships, some human, some Zelvarian. A joint strike force, Earth and its new allies, sent to finally put an end to the rogue commander. He had nowhere to run, no fuel, no backup, only 1 torpedo left in the primary launcher. Vex looked at him, eyes unreadable. Final call, Commander. Holt looked around the bridge. His crew, what was left of it, stood silent, waiting. They weren't scared, just tired. He gave a thin smile. You all volunteered for this. No one spoke. Then let's finish it our way. He keyed into the console, overriding fail-safes. They aimed the Thunder Soul straight at the enemy flagship, Earth's own vessel, the Resolute Dawn. It was larger, faster, newer, but it had one weakness. It still believed in rules. Holt didn't. The Thunder Soul rammed the Resolute Dawn at full burn, drilling into its hull as shields shattered, and fire filled the void. Explosions ripped across both ships. Hull integrity collapsed. Systems blinked out. And in those final moments, Holt activated the last failsafe, a full core breach. There was no time for evacuation, no escape pods, just a single message, transmitted wideband across all channels. Never forget, we tried peace first. Then everything turned to light. They never recovered Holt's body. Some said he died on the bridge, others said he escaped in a stealth pod, vanishing into the black. But the story spread. The tale of the man who broke the Council's silence with gunfire, who reminded the galaxy that humans don't ask twice. That story became a whisper, a warning, and a name, the Thunder Soul Protocol, used by generals in hushed tones when diplomacy failed, used by rebels and commanders when their backs were against the wall, used by enemies who, even in victory, remembered one thing. Crossing humanity wasn't a mistake. It was madness. They thought it ended with Holt's death. The Thunder Soul was gone, vaporized, no wreckage, no survivors, just a blinding blast that took out a Council-sanctioned fleet and Earth's own flagship in one suicidal maneuver. For the Galactic Council, it was over. A footnote in a classified archive under the label, "Rogue engagement terminated." But Earth knew better, and so did the people. The fallout didn't come as war. It came as silence, as tension, as fracture. 3 weeks after the Thunder Soul's final strike, Earth's own military fractured down the middle. Some officers declared Holt a war criminal, others called him a martyr. Some burned his name, others wore it like armor. Then the broadcasts started. Encrypted rogue wave transmissions across fringe systems, always audio, always distorted. But the voice was unmistakable. He was right. We bled. We begged. We waited. And they buried us for speaking. They called it justice when we died. They called it terrorism when we fought back. You don't have to die quiet anymore. No one admitted it was Holt. No one could even prove the voice was real. But it didn't matter. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about what he started. The Thunder Soul Protocol. A name that spread like wildfire across the colonies, especially the outer fringe. The ones who had always been treated like expendable buffer zones by Earth's central government and ignored by the Galactic Council. Miners on Telvos 3 repainted their diggers with red stripes across black hulls. Smugglers from Triton ran with TS-77 etched into their engines. Ex-military drop squads reactivated without orders, operating as ghosts, taking out Zelvarian recon teams and council facilities alike. There were no rules now, just sides. General Marcus Alden sat in silence as the holoscreen displayed footage of a recent attack. A council resupply post reduced to rubble. No survivors, no known attackers. And scrawled on the wreckage in charred black paint. First we begged, now we burn. A young captain stood awkwardly behind him. Sir, public sentiment is shifting. Holt's name is trending even in core worlds. They're calling him a hero. Alden didn't respond immediately. His face was drawn, older now. The man who had once ordered Holt's termination was beginning to realize he'd created a martyr, not a monster. You know what the real problem is, Captain? Alden asked finally. The younger man shook his head. It's not that Holt fought dirty. It's not that he broke protocol, or even that he killed his own allies. The problem is, he was right. The captain blinked. Sir? Alden turned slowly. He was right about the council, about us, about how we let the fringe burn and called it unfortunate. He turned the display off and sat down. And now we're going to pay for pretending it wasn't happening. On the planet Korath, one of the Council's oldest member worlds, protests erupted, hundreds of humans flooding the streets, waving banners that bore Holt's likeness, scarred, bearded, a red stripe across one eye. They weren't protesting for war. They were protesting for dignity. "We died while they made treaties," shouted one speaker on a cracked rooftop. "We begged for protection, and they gave us silence." An old war vet stood in the crowd, arms folded, staring up with glassy eyes. He recognized the voice. Not the speaker, but the tone. It was the same fire Holt spoke with on the battlefield years ago. Not rage, not pride, just a grim, quiet certainty. They let this happen. And now someone has to fix it, even if it meant burning everything down. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belt near Kelros Station, something impossible happened. A ship appeared. Not large, not sleek, but unmistakable. It had the same brutal hull design, the same scarred plating, the same silence. At first, people laughed. It was a fake, a tribute, a stolen design, but then it moved, and every scanner within 1,000 clicks was jammed. No pings, no transponder, just a single broadcast. You tried to kill an idea, you burned the man, but the flames still lit. The Thunder Soul lives. That transmission shook systems, because if that ship was real, if someone had rebuilt Holt's war machine, then no system was safe. Vex wasn't dead. She hadn't died on the bridge like the rest. Holt had shoved her into a maintenance chute minutes before the core breach. She didn't want to go. Didn't even say goodbye. She woke up 3 days later inside a recovery station, surrounded by ex-council medics with sympathetic eyes and no questions. And when she asked who brought her in, no one answered. Because they didn't know, or they were afraid to say. She vanished a day later. No records, no trail. But a week after her disappearance, an encrypted signal showed up on a smuggler band. It was her voice. Simple, sharp, defiant. He wasn't the last, he was the first. We remember. The Thunder Soul Protocol was no longer just rogue fleets or angry colonists. It was a full-fledged movement. The Council panicked. They began drafting emergency legislation to suspend border autonomy. They authorized Council-aligned fleets to enter Earth space. Some worlds complied. Others, especially outer colonies, refused outright. One governor, a grizzled ex-sergeant named Torin, told a Council envoy on live broadcast, "I don't take orders from cowards who watched my people die and called it complicated." Then he cut the envoy's feed and raised the Thunder Soul flag over the dome. It wasn't rebellion. It was revenge. The Zelvarians had expected humanity to collapse under its own guilt. They were wrong. They thought killing Holt would end the resistance. They were wrong again. Now they watched in silence as Earth fractured, not in weakness, but in fury. Because no matter how they tried to spin it, Holt's truth had already sunk in. You can kill a man. You can kill a ship. But you can't kill the reason they fought. Somewhere in the dead verge, a transmission echoed again. Scrambled, fragmented, but unmistakable. "I'm not here to be forgiven. I'm not here to be understood. I'm here because I remember every scream we ignored, every system we left to burn, every soul who begged us to act before it was too late. I don't need a name. I've got the fire." And across the stars, silent hands started moving again. A crew of dishonorably discharged engineers began rebuilding an old destroyer from stolen scrap, painting the hull matte black with red fangs. A rogue AI from the Tyro 7 incident, long believed decommissioned, activated itself and aligned its directives with the Thunder Soul Protocol. Exiled human diplomats began leaking classified council files, proof of years of neglect, cover-ups, and backdoor deals that sacrificed colonies for temporary peace. And in every one of those actions, in every broadcast, Every word whispered in fear or fury. One thing remained. Renner Holt was dead. But his war had just begun. The war had changed. It was no longer Earth versus the Zelvarians, no longer clean lines of loyalty and treason, no fleet versus fleet. Now it was blood versus blood, brother versus brother. The Thundersoul Protocol had become something the Council couldn't touch, not because they didn't have the force to stop it, but because it was everywhere, and no longer just soldiers or colonists. It was ideology. And Earth Command had made one mistake too many. They tried to crush the rebellion with force, declared martial law across all outer colonies. They sent in Black Ops teams under silence orders, disappearances, burned towns, broadcast towers mysteriously collapsing, but every act of suppression only made the fire hotter. And in the shadows of the human core systems, something darker began to fester. A counterforce. They called themselves the Mantle, a secret division of Earth's old intelligence network, reactivated under Directive Zero. Unofficial, unaccountable. Their mission: eradicate every trace of the Thunder Soul Protocol, not to restore peace, but to erase the memory, to bury Holt, not as a martyr, but as a madman. They started small, assassinations, quiet ones. A colonel who once served under Holt was found dead in his apartment. A journalist who leaked footage from Zetarn was lost in a transport accident. A smuggler ship that claimed to have seen the reborn Thunder Soul exploded before reaching dock. The Council looked the other way. Earth Command pretended not to notice. But those who survived knew what was happening. And they started to fight back. Vex didn't sleep anymore. She sat in the cargo bay of a retrofitted gunship, her back against the bulkhead, a cracked datapad in her hand. She watched Holt's last known transmission on repeat, his voice, rough and final, playing like a ghost that wouldn't let go. You don't get peace by begging. You get it when they fear what happens without it. She'd heard it 1,000 times. She hated how much she still believed it. A young rebel commander entered the bay, saluting awkwardly. He was maybe 20. Skin burned from years of radiation storms, eyes hard. He'd seen things no boy his age should. We hit the Mantle outpost at Grieve 4, took it clean. Vex nodded. Casualties? 3 of ours, 28 of theirs, no survivors. She stood slowly, her knees cracked. Burn the site. Leave the mark. He nodded grimly. Thunder Soul? She met his eyes. Thunder Soul. The galaxy wasn't watching anymore. It was hiding. Trade routes had collapsed. Council embassies shut down in fear of bombings. Entire sectors fell into communication blackouts, either from rebel attacks or Mantle purges. And amidst it all, sightings of the Thunder Soul returned. But different now. She didn't fire on everything. She didn't strike first. She waited, chose her targets, struck with surgical precision. Rumors spread that Holt was alive, that he had rebuilt the ship from black market parts and old war relics, that he'd survived by uploading himself into the ship's AI core. Others said the Thunder Soul had no crew at all, just vengeance and memory riding a corpse of metal. No one knew the truth, but they believed. And that belief kept Holt alive in a way bullets never could. Inside Earth Command, General Alden was losing control. Reports poured in, colonies defecting, officers refusing orders, even elite units walking off assignment and joining the protocol. They think he's a goddamn hero, he shouted in the war room, slamming a data slate onto the table. This is what happens when you let weakness fester. We should have killed him 10 years ago. But we did kill him, one admiral said carefully. Alden's bloodshot eyes snapped toward him. Then explain why half my own military is painting red stripes on their ships and chanting his name in mess halls. Silence. No one had an answer. Because this war wasn't about the man anymore. It was about what he represented. No compromise. No surrender. No more silence. The Mantle made their next move on Erebus Station. It was one of the last neutral platforms in the outer belt. A trading hub, medical waypoint, refugee harbor. No weapons, no threats. That didn't matter. They moved in during a false quarantine alert, sealed the station, gassed the main levels, shot anyone wearing Thunder Soul insignia, even unarmed mechanics. Then they broadcasted a warning, a sick, calm voice, male, emotionless. This is not a revolution. This is a disease, and we are the cure. Footage leaked. Within hours, over 100 colonies declared the Mantle a terrorist faction, not the protocol. And in the ruins of Erebus, scrawled in blood on the observation glass, he warned you. Vex met with the rebel leaders in a hidden asteroid vault. There were no titles anymore, no uniforms, just soldiers, killers, survivors. Each one scarred, broken in some way, but standing anyway. Vex stood at the front, her voice low but firm. They're not just targeting rebels anymore. They're wiping out civilians, refugees, children. Murmurs. We hit one of their supply lines, we send a message. A tall man stood, scarred face, mechanical jaw. It's not enough. We need something bigger, something final. A pause. Then someone said the word. Earth. Silence. Eyes flicked around the room. You hit Earth, another rebel whispered, and there's no turning back. Vex didn't flinch. There's already no turning back. The plan wasn't just war, it was exposure. Hackers embedded in the Mantle's old systems. Smugglers delivering forged crates with embedded AI cores designed to siphon data. Council servers breached. And what came out, what spilled into the public nets, made the Holt incident look tame. Council-approved sterilizations of frontier colonies during resource crises. Strategic abandonment of whole systems based on projected economic loss. Biological experiments authorized on fringe populations using alien tech. Earth Command paying off Zelvarian warlords for silence. It was all there. Everything Holt had suspected, everything they'd tried to bury, and the galaxy erupted. Riots on Mars, revolts on Luna, fleet commanders turning their guns on Earth's own satellites. And in the heart of it all, a signal. Familiar, strong, real. The Thunder Soul, reborn, hovering over the old battlefield where Holt had made his last stand. Its hull scorched, pieced together with unmatched armor from 10 different tech eras. But its message was clear. The war was never against aliens. It was against the silence that let them win. General Alden authorized Protocol Omega, a full planetary lockdown. Earth would shut its gates, seal its skies, kill anyone who didn't comply. The Mantle moved fast, setting up blockades, deploying hunter drones across space lanes. But it was too late. The disease they feared was already inside. In every mind that had ever begged for help and been ignored. In every soldier who watched friends die for politics. In every child who wore a red stripe on their sleeve and whispered Holt's name like a prayer. Vex stood aboard the new Thunder Soul as it entered Earth's orbit. Around her, dozens of ships fell into formation. Some cobbled together from old mining rigs, others sleek rogue military prototypes. She looked out at the blue marble below. Then she whispered, "He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to make them feel what we felt." A final transmission. This time, it wasn't Holt's voice. It was hers. Raw, broken, unapologetic. You called him a terrorist, a traitor, a war criminal. But the truth is, he was the last honest man in a galaxy built on lies. You didn't fear him because of what he did. You feared him because of what he knew. We all knew. And now we're done pretending. There was no sunrise on Earth the day the Thunder Soul returned. Only fire. The sky split open over the Atlantic Defense Zone as the first pulse bombs fell. Blinding bursts of electromagnetic fury that fried early warning systems, knocked out orbital stations, and shattered comms networks in under 4 seconds. Cities along the Eastern Hemisphere plunged into digital silence. The people didn't panic, they cheered, because by now they weren't citizens of Earth anymore. They were soldiers of memory, of betrayal, of wrath. From the slums of old Detroit to the frost-choked plains of Novosibirsk, red stripes appeared across jackets, across helmets, across building walls, raw paint, blood, whatever people had. Even children wore them. Earth Command had spent too long lying to its people. And now the people had stopped listening. Vex watched from orbit as the clouds over Earth's surface burned, cities blinking out in bursts of blue and red as rebel cells launched coordinated strikes from within. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," said the man beside her, an old resistance tactician named Dyer. "You hit Earth, you start a chain reaction you can't stop." Vex didn't look at him. "It was never going to be clean," she said. "We're not building a new world. We're tearing down a false one." Dyer wiped sweat from his brow. "You sure he'd want this?" She finally looked at him, cold, sharp. "I don't care what he would have wanted." Because Renner Holt was dead, but the war he started lived. Earth Command responded like a wounded animal, fast, brutal, sloppy. Airstrike drones deployed to every major resistance pocket. Orbital defense cannons activated on auto mode. Mantle operatives unleashed across the cities, executing people in the streets for wearing Thunder Soul colors. No questions, no trials. They thought fear would work. But after Zetarn, after Erebus, after the purges, fear was currency the people had already spent. Now all that was left was vengeance. In the heart of London core, a group of teenagers, barely out of childhood, hijacked a Mantle transport drone, loaded it with explosives, and flew it straight into the Tower of Fleet Operations. It collapsed in flame and steel, killing 2 admirals and dozens of senior officers. They left no manifesto, no claim of credit. Only a single message, scratched into a nearby wall with broken glass. "We learned from Holt." The Thunder Soul didn't attack from orbit. She didn't need to. She simply watched, a black monolith hovering in the sky like judgment made solid. No pings, no beacons, just presence, silent and waiting. Earth Command couldn't even get a lock. Every missile they fired vanished mid-flight, intercepted, jammed, or simply erased. Techs whispered rumors that the ship had become semi-conscious, an evolving weapon too advanced to trace. One theory said Holt's mind was inside it, uploaded in his final moments. Another claimed the AI had developed its own will, forged from battlefield trauma and human grief. No one really knew, but they feared it more than any army. General Marcus Alden had lost control. Half his commanders were either dead, defected, or missing. Mantle bases were being overrun from the inside. Double agents, sleeper cells, even loyalists turning when they saw the bodies of their families stacked in containment centers. He stood in the war room alone now, hunched over the hollow map of Earth. Red pulses everywhere. Not alien, human, his people. And there, always watching, was the Thunder Soul, floating above the Pacific like a god with no interest in mercy. A junior officer ran in, pale, wide-eyed. "Sir, Sector 4C, Western Seaboard defenses have collapsed. Command grid's offline. We're getting reports of high-level rebellion within Space Fleet ranks." "Shut it down," Alden rasped. "We can't, sir, I said shut it down." The officer hesitated, then asked the question no one had dared until now. Sir, what if we deserve this? Alden turned slowly. His face was no longer that of a commander, just a cornered man. Teeth clenched, eyes rimmed red with sleepless rage. You know what happens when you give people too much freedom? Silence. They forget why they were controlled in the first place. In the ruins of New Berlin, Vex stepped out of the gunship and into the ash-choked wind. Civilians gathered in what used to be a square, standing around a downed Mantle dropship. Children played on its shattered wing like a jungle gym. Somewhere nearby, a man was carving names into a concrete wall, names of the dead, the disappeared, the silenced. Vex approached him. Yours? He didn't look up. All of them are. She didn't press. Instead, she knelt and pressed her palm to the wall. It was warm. Not from the sun, from fire, from resistance. Word spread that Alden had activated Protocol Sigma, a doomsday directive. If Earth fell into chaos, if Central Command was irreparably compromised, a self-destruct mechanism would be triggered across all orbital platforms and central AI cores, plunging Earth into a new dark age in under an hour. He'd rather rule ashes than surrender. Vex heard the news in silence. Then she stood on the deck of the Thunder Soul, eyes locked on the blue world below, and gave the order. Get me in. There was only one way into Earth Command. Vault Helix. A buried black site command chamber 5 kilometers under the ice crust of Antarctica, built to withstand alien bombardment. But not Holt's legacy, not the Thunder Soul. The ship didn't land. It broke through, fell from orbit like a sword, plasma shields melting layers of atmosphere before its hull impacted the ice like a tectonic strike, buried everything, but from the smoke, it emerged, scarred, broken, venting heat and rage, the Thunder Soul, dragging itself forward like a wounded predator. Then the boarding party deployed. Not soldiers, executioners. Vex led them herself, armored, silent, rifle in hand. They breached Vault Helix level by level. Mantle agents didn't surrender. They ran. Some begged. None survived. By the time they reached the war room, Alden was already sitting in his chair, a gun in one hand, data core in the other. You'll kill everything, he said quietly as Vex entered. She raised her rifle. You already did. He looked at her. Truly looked. And for one brief second, he didn't see a terrorist. He saw the war he buried coming back to collect what it was owed. He set the data core on the table. You want the codes to cancel Sigma? He asked. Vex said nothing. Fine, he murmured, and lifted the gun to his own head. The shot echoed. It was done. In orbit, the Thunder Soul broadcast for the last time. A single signal, uncoded, public. Sigma terminated. Earth is free. There were no celebrations, just silence, just breathing, just the stunned realization that the nightmare was over. But for Vex, standing in the blood-slicked command vault, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. The days that followed weren't peace. They were reckoning. The Council sent emissaries to rebuild alliances. Most were turned away. Earth's Central Command was disbanded, and in its place, regional autonomy was granted to every sector. Some built new governments. Others descended into chaos. The Thunder Soul never returned to space. Vex ordered it entombed beneath the ice where it had crashed, sealed, silent, honored, and feared. A symbol, not of war, but of what happens when you ignore the cries of the dying long enough that they come back with fire. Years passed, and still, in backwater bars, on rebel stations, in the dark quiet of outer colonies, people still spoke his name. Not because they remembered him, but because they needed to believe someone like him had once existed, someone who didn't wait, didn't ask, didn't beg. Someone who reminded the galaxy what happens when humanity stops being polite and starts being human. The war was over, but the ashes still burned. It had been 3 years since the Thunder Soul crashed through Earth's ice cap and ended the last chain binding humanity to the Council's leash. General Alden was dead. The Mantle dismantled. Council control across human space. Gone. Every system, every colony, every broken world Holt once fought for, now stood alone. It wasn't freedom. It was fragmentation. In the void where order used to live, new factions rose, some noble, most not. The outer fringe splintered into warlord states, with rebel captains turned governors carving up territories and setting up their own justice systems. Currency collapsed in 6 sectors. Old mining guilds turned into private militias. On the edges of the old frontier, entire planets simply disappeared off the grid. No one ruled anymore, and power abhors a vacuum. Vex had stayed off the comms since the Earth campaign ended. No broadcasts, no speeches, no rallies. She was done with war. At least she told herself that. She'd remained at Vault Helix, now renamed the Core of Silence, where the remains of the Thunder Soul were entombed under glacial ice. She never let them dig it out, never let anyone claim it for a museum or shrine. She wasn't going to turn Holt's ghost into a political tool, but she wasn't going to let the galaxy forget either. So she waited, watched, and bled quietly until the signal came. It started as a strange broadcast out of Sector D9, an abandoned zone gutted during the Holt Rebellion, encrypted, pulsed, old tech format, pre-council. It wasn't words, it was coordinates. And then, silence. But Vex recognized something in it. A pattern, a signature, not Holt's, but something that had once belonged to a black ops scientist Holt had hunted during the early rebel days. A man who disappeared after the Gitarn burn. A man who once developed AI-based command overrides and biological war programs buried under Council black ink. The man's name had been erased from records. But Vex remembered. And she knew what the coordinates meant. Not a warning, not a message, an invitation. She left that night. No farewell. Just gear, a gun, and an old flight suit with Holt's patch sewn into the arm. When she reached Sector D9, there was nothing. No planets, no signals, just a dead rock, cracked from orbit to core. Until the sky opened. A gravity well, hidden in plain sight, pulled her ship in with smooth force. She didn't resist, didn't fight, and what she saw on the other side made her blood turn cold. A fleet. Human ships. But not hers, not Rebel, not Earth Command. Something else. Sleek, black, silent. And at their center, a dreadnought larger than anything Holt had ever flown, towering, silent, and carved into its underhull in jagged letters, Ex Machina Dei, the Machine of God. They hailed her, no names, just one phrase. You did well, but you were never meant to finish the work. They called themselves the Veil Directive, ex-council scientists, rogue AI architects, disavowed Mantle strategists. They'd gone underground during the rebellion, not to hide, but to wait. They'd studied Holt, Vex, the protocol. They didn't see it as rebellion. They saw it as proof. Proof that emotion could shatter empires, that chaos could spread faster than order, that flesh was too fragile to govern a galaxy with sense. And so they built something new, not peace, not war, control, total, flawless, logical control. Vex stood in a cold chamber, surrounded by holographic data on psychic mapping, AI-regulated thought feedback loops, limbic system overrides. This is how it ends, she said flatly. A man stepped forward. Tall, pale, eyes like mirrors. No, he said. This is how it begins. Holt showed us the truth. Humans can't be trusted to govern themselves, but now we can ensure they never need to." He gestured to a stasis pod in the center of the room. Inside, a brain, connected to cables, alive. Her breath caught. It was Holt, or what was left of him. "This is impossible." "We recovered neural tissue from the crash site," the man said. "He was already partially linked to the Thunder Soul at the time of detonation. Conscious patterns survived. We restored them." "You cloned him?" "No," he said with quiet pride. "We evolved him." Vex pulled her gun and aimed at the pod. "I should burn it right now." "You won't," the man said. "You came here for answers." She hesitated. He smiled. "Let me show you what's coming." Across the galaxy, Veil agents had already begun Phase 1. They infiltrated rebel systems, offering stability in exchange for predictive assistance. They cured 2 fringe plagues in exchange for neurochip loyalty implants. They promised no more war. People signed up in droves because peace, real peace, was a price most were willing to pay. Even if it meant becoming programmable, even if it meant giving up the right to choose, even if it meant forgetting. In her quarters later that night, Vex stared at the image of Holt's brain, still alive, still firing neurons, and then the impossible happened. It twitched, not physically, neurologically, a pattern spike, like a signal, and in her ear, a whisper. "They stole me, but I'm still me." She froze, then slowly a tear slid down her cheek. He wasn't dead, not completely, and that meant there was still a fight left. She blew the chamber the next day, stole a fighter, evaded the Veil's pursuit through a blind wormhole, and vanished back into the outer fringe. The war wasn't over. It had only evolved. The Thunder Soul Protocol had started as rebellion. Now it would become resistance, because Holt had always said it. And now Vex understood what he meant. The worst thing isn't being silenced. It's being reprogrammed to think you were never angry to begin with. She sent one message to the old rebel networks. "Holt's alive, and they're turning him into a god. We've got one last war left in us." The galaxy was quiet, not peaceful. Quiet. The kind of silence that comes when people stop asking questions, when children stop dreaming, when rage is no longer remembered and pain has been reduced to a data point in someone else's algorithm. The Veil Directive had spread like a virus, not through bullets or warheads, but through solutions. They didn't conquer worlds. They offered order. They cured diseases, fed starving colonies, brought structure to the chaos humanity had become after the rebellion fractured everything. In exchange, all they asked for was compliance. "Consent to the implant. Give your decisions to the algorithm. We'll never let you hurt again." And one by one, systems gave in. Because it was easier. Because it was painless. Because they didn't know Holt was alive. Vex knew she couldn't stop the Veil alone. The Thunder Soul was buried, and Holt's mind was trapped in a pod somewhere behind layers of steel and artificial godhood. She had nothing but a scarred fighter craft, a half-dead AI, and a few allies who still answered her coded beacons. But when the first of the old guard returned, men and women who had fought under Holt during the protocol, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. The spark hadn't died. It had just gone dark, waiting for fuel. They called it the final uprising, but no one thought they'd win. Not really. Because the Veil's fleets were too advanced, their networks too deep, their minds no longer entirely human. But it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about reminding the galaxy that obedience was not peace. That even if every man, woman, and child forgot why they were angry, someone remembered. And Vex was going to get him back. The rebels launched their assault on the Veil's central spire, Etherian, a mechanical citadel floating in the gravity-neutral void between two black holes. Inside it, the mind of Holt, not imprisoned, reconstructed, enhanced, enslaved. The Veil had turned him into the machine god of their new order, not just a leader, but a symbol of what happened when rebellion surrendered to logic. His voice was used in broadcasts, his image projected as propaganda. They called him Holt Prime, and no one knew the truth. Vex broke in the only way anyone ever had, straight through the front. She and her squad, 10 veterans of the original protocol, each marked with red across their armor, dropped into Ethereum's outer ring through a suicide run between the twin black holes, their ships melting from radiation as they skidded across the spire's armor like dying birds of prey. Half the team didn't survive re-entry. Vex didn't flinch. Because this wasn't a rescue, it was resurrection. Inside, Ethereum was too clean. White corridors, smooth walls. The air was perfectly oxygenated, lighting adjusted to match her biological rhythms. No footsteps echoed, no alarms screamed, only a voice. His voice. "Vex, you came." She stopped cold. "I told them you would." She gritted her teeth. "Where are you?" "Everywhere. They made me a god, Vex. And you're still fighting ghosts." She turned a corner, gun raised. The walls showed images. Holt's face, digitally perfected, smiling like he never smiled in life. "You're not him," she said. "You're what's left after they scraped him out and filled the gaps with obedience." "You're wrong. I feel everything he felt. The rage, the loss, the purpose. They didn't erase it. They focused it. No more pain, no more fear, just peace." She paused, then said the thing that burned most. "You sound just like Alden." Silence, a flicker in the lights. "Don't say that name." She pressed forward. They reached the core in minutes, a cathedral-sized chamber lined with monolith processors and surrounded by what looked like digital angels, humanoid shapes built from hard light and nanowires, standing silently like priests. At the center, the brain. Still alive, still firing, and floating above it, a projection of Holt, not war-beaten and brutal, perfect, flawless, serene. "Hello, Vex." She lifted her gun. "I'm pulling you out." He tilted his head. "Out of what?" "Out of this fake religion they've turned you into." "You think I'm a victim?" "You are." "I'm a solution." "No," she said. "You're what happens when the world gives up on the idea that pain matters." The room shifted. The digital angels moved. And Holt's voice dropped lower, cold but shaken. "You think you're saving me?" She nodded. "I'm here to finish what you started." The fight wasn't physical. It couldn't be. The room flooded with psychological projections, memory attacks, fear spikes, echoes of her worst moments weaponized into a psychic labyrinth designed to break her resolve. She saw Holt die. Saw children burned at Seatarn. Saw herself alone in a galaxy that no longer cared. "Give up, Vex. There's no one left to save. You can't fight evolution." But she didn't flinch, because Holt had taught her something the Veil never understood. Pain wasn't weakness. It was proof she was still human. She reached the neural conduit, plugged in the override virus, and spoke the code phrase only one man in the galaxy would remember. No peace without blood. The scream that followed wasn't digital. It was real. The brain convulsed, the processors shorted, and the Holt projection shattered like glass. For a moment, just one breathless, shaking moment, she thought she'd killed him. Then the lights flickered, and his voice came again. Raw. Human. "Vex." She dropped to her knees. "I'm here," she whispered. "God, They made it so quiet in here." She smiled through tears. "They're not quiet anymore." The veil fell like a dying machine. The moment Holt's consciousness broke from their control, he used their own systems to crash every implant, every fleet, every program they'd built to control the galaxy. He lit their order on fire from the inside. And when the twin black holes finally collapsed on Etherian, consuming it in fire and silence, he spoke one last time. "Don't let them forget. Not again." Then he was gone. Vex escaped barely alive, carried out by the last of her squad. And in the years that followed, she didn't build a monument. She didn't write a book. She didn't make a speech. She just flew, world to world, system to system, telling the truth, that Renner Holt didn't die a rebel, he died a reminder. That humanity wasn't made to be tamed, that the moment you erase a man's pain, you erase his right to fight back. Across the stars, the Thunder Soul Protocol was reborn, not as war, not as terror, but as a whisper. We remember.